Welcome back to the bonus segment. We're going to continue talking about the 10 elements of ransomware exercise design. Regina, take it away.
Great, thank you. How fun, a bonus round. We've never done a bonus round before. This is way fun.
And no time limit on this one either.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Okay, so number 5 is really, as I've talked about or alluded to just a moment ago, it's really the bones of the story. And I can't emphasize this, how important it is. Because remember, in an exercise, you're creating an entire artificial world. And in particular, a technology exercise is far more complicated because of, what's up, what's down, when did it happen, when did these different things go on? You have to have a really clear bones, if you will, which is the timeline and impact. And the technology design team gives that to you. When I do a design exercise, I'm designing about, I think 20 right now. They're all ransomware. Oh my God, I'm so sick of ransomware, I could scream. But the bones of the story essentially are really critical because it's so important about where you're going. Because remember, this is an entirely made up world, right? The only people that know really what's going on is the design team and the simulators that are in the exercise, and everybody else is just kind of trying to figure it out. It's very, and all the cyber exercises I've done, it's confusing, right? Because when you lose everything or you lose certain things, people are still sitting in the exercise wondering, like, can I send an email? Can I access a database? And if you don't have really clear direction from the design team about what's up and down, you can screw it up, and you don't want to do that. So that's what the bones are all about.
I just thought of a question. When you're going through the exercise, are the design team members a part of that exercise?
Yes, they are. They act as simulators. The design team, the exercise design team on the technology side, and you have to have that. And I'll talk a lot about that in particular next month, but you've got to have them as simulators because I need somebody to hold truth to power. What do I mean by that? You've probably done a lot of technology exercises. I love technology professionals, but they sometimes make things up and they fix things that aren't impossible to fix, right? And so I need somebody that's going to look at them and say, no, we tried to boot up that server again and it didn't work or whatever. I need somebody who knows the language, who understands the architecture and the environment to say, no, it didn't work, or to have a discourse with them. So you have to have IT simulators. If you don't have an IT simulator, then your exercise is not going to be very good. I'll just tell you that flat out. Just because I need somebody to hold truth to power. Right. So going back to this bones story again, is that really what this is that they basically are highlighting for me the bones. 8 o'clock, malware deployed. 8:07, the following thing happened. The impact is, the call centers can't answer calls or whatever it is. And they literally outline it. So you have to really think through this because the business unit team is going to take these bones and that's going to help them write the injects. So you have to look at applications, up or down, data, yes or no. Is your website up? Can you do voice over IP? Are you encrypting laptops or desktops or maybe just one particular server? We have to be so clear because remember, if we're not clear, no one's clear. And that's when you design an exercise, you are the holder of the vision. That's your job. And if you don't have the vision, no one else is. And then it just gets off rail. So this is kind of an example. This is very abbreviated, but just gives your listeners an idea what I'm talking about. This doesn't have timestamps. This basically just talks about what's up and down. And this, what you would do is you would literally put, maybe there's a portal that's down, but a company website is up because it's outsourced. You might have certain things that you're going to list exactly what applications, what data. The reason this is important, and ideally in a real event, this is what your folks should be preparing and showing, is this is what's up and down. But this, again, is really important in an exercise because, an exercise may only be 4 hours or something, and you need people to get their brains wrapped around it. What's up, what's down, and then the IT simulators are there to provide additional guidance. Because number 6, we are focused on the business impact. So remember that the business unit's going to take the bones that the IT design team created, and what they're going to do is they're going to tell the story through injects. And just think about, if your website is down, what does that mean? Well, you're going to get calls from reporters. You'll get calls from major customers. You might have regulators, depending on what your industry is, wondering what's going on with you. So depending on your industry, if your website is down, it is catastrophic. Maybe you've got call centers, and maybe depending on what you've affected, I can call the call center and I get the phone gets answered, but they can't access any of my records. Well, how helpful is that? And then you can see then social media would start riffing about you. Gosh, I called that insurance company, blah, 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 and they can't help me. They have some sort of problem. Then social media starts riffing on that, right?
Mm-hmm. And they start giving the narrative.
Right, right. So again, that goes back to the bones. You understand what's up and down. You understand what the business impact is, and then you tell that story through Injects. And maybe you could have something where the security system is down. So you have no access control. You have no badges. So do you have to then deploy guards to every exit and entrance? What about cameras? You don't have cameras anymore. I mean, you can begin to see how you tell the story and what needs to happen. And what you need to understand in an exercise is if you don't tell them, they don't know. And the way you tell them is by writing an inject. Oh, did you know a security guard calls in and says, I can't, the badging system seems to have gone down. What do I do? Oh, well, gee, do we have a process for that? Right. So again, they don't know if you don't tell them. And that's what the inject does. So on this particular slide, well, you see, this is just a sampling of what inject forms look like that we create. So this is, we normally do these in Word simply because then we end up pasting these into forms. And if it's in Word, it's just easier. So there's a column which would be turned into the number. Then there's the design team person, initials that initially is doing this. If they know how it's going to get routed, the caller name. We actually ask people to impersonate real people. I want it to feel when you get that inject like, oh my gosh, did you know that Alex Bullock called me and he asked the following thing? I want them to go like, oh my God, I don't want it to be a fake name. And then you have the inject, and these are very simple examples. You've got rumors going around that we've been hit by a cyber attack. What do I tell my employees? Great example, right? Do we have insurance coverage for this? And what are the requirements? And what's the deductible? And so on and so on. So this is examples of what we would expect to see. Much more highly refined, of course, but this is a sample. And we expect to use real client names. We expect to have real names for callers. And we tell them straight away that when they get an inject, it's not really coming from that person. So they don't ring them and say, oh my God, Alex, I didn't know that was going on. But we make it feel like it's the real deal because I want them to sweat and feel miserable at the end, which I already told you that. Right. Number 7 is you have to conduct the right exercise, which really gets to the question you were talking about, Alex, which is about the simulators. Most of the people in our field design what I call a blah, blah, blah exercise. So I remember I've designed thousands of exercises. I've written 3 textbooks on it. Most people design simple tabletop exercises. Now, that's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. And the first time you do an exercise with somebody and they have a new plan or it's a new team or they haven't had an exercise in a long time, you might do an exercise that's a tabletop. And that's traditionally where, everything is displayed on slides behind you and you talk through the narrative and people say, I would do this, I would do that. That's what I call a blah, blah, blah exercise. They don't have to solve anything. They don't have to do anything. They just have to say, I would do this and that. Well, okay, that's interesting, but not so much. I mean, we rarely do those, and people don't hire us to do those. We design much more sophisticated exercises. And what you really need to make an IT exercise on ransomware work is you have to have simulators. And that's either an advanced tabletop, a functional, or a full scale. And most people would do an advanced tabletop. So you can do this in a variety of different ways. If you're doing an exercise where everybody's physically together, I may never do one of those again. I don't know. I've done about 175 virtual exercises since March of 2020. Before then, I had never done one, just to give you a sense of that. But in advanced tabletop, you can have a simulation team that's available either on a conference bridge. You can have them available depending on what the virtual platform you're using on MS Teams. They can be spun off in a room. They can be called on their mobiles. But they basically are going to be, engaging with people. You can also have all the injects answered by a simulator, so I'm impersonating Alex Bullock and they're calling me, right? And I make them come up with a decent answer. So when they say, gee, I would do this, I'd say, well, we tried that and it didn't work. And they go, oh, wow. Then they have to go back to their team and say, it didn't work. Oh, now what are we going to do? Your job is to really push them. And if you have a fully simulated exercise, you can do them. And that's what a simulation team is all about. Minimally, you need an IT simulation team. And then ideally, if the team is more advanced, you could have them actually do all of the injects could be simulated. But minimally, you need an IT design team. Number 8, you need to expose the perpetrator. So what do I mean by that? Every executive is most concerned about reputation and brand, but I'm sure you already know this, that the vast majority of cyber events are never, ever, 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 ever told to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So then no one's going to know. Well, I can't have that if the number one concern is reputation and brand. So we always out them. Not really, of course, because that would be a career limiting move, but almost every exercise we have a perpetrator that is outing the customer. And what they're doing is they're usually doing it like on Twitter. I have my technology professionals in my company. We have an AV team that is just killer, and they make the most bizarre avatar tweets where they're literally talking about you on a weird kind of avatar, and it looks like it's completely on a Twitter background. That's not really on Twitter, of course, but in my exercise, it looks like it is. And everybody's going to start to learn about it. So they'll say something about you. And that's powerful because now they actually have to prepare the communications. They actually have to do something. Mm-hmm. That's really important. So you have to expose this. So you have to leak it out. And the best way to do it is something like Twitter, because it's all about their reputation and the brand. And I can't emphasize that enough. If it never leaks out, they never have to do anything. They'll just sweat and be nervous. I'm going to make them have to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. So those are the 8 things you have to do before you actually even get anywhere in the exercise. And then the last 2 things are what you do after the fact. In our next month, we're going to talk about all the gory details of designing an exercise that you need to know. Number 9, which is really important, is you have to have a really well-honed after-action report, and you've got to figure out what you're going to do with it in advance. I will say to you that when we're hired to do an exercise for someone, we guarantee that our after-action reports are issued within 7 to 10 days. Why do we rush them out? Because I know after doing this for so many years that if you don't get an after-action report in somebody's hot hands shortly after the experience, what's happened since then, right? If it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, okay, it was a big deal for a few days, and then every day you wait past that, it's not such a big deal anymore. And then so I get it to them in 7 days, and then, oh my gosh, they sit on it, they look at it, so you got to have a plan about what you're going to do with this after action report, and you better write a good one, because you can really get a huge amount of punch out of this. So you want to make sure that your recommendations, and by the way, this can be a politically sensitive report, right?
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Right. Right. So it needs to be factual. We tie it, all of our recommendations are tied to the exercise learnings, and I try and tie them to standards whenever I can. And I will usually organize the recommendations in several headers, like maybe one's cybersecurity, maybe something about communications, something about business continuity or crisis management. And in most organizations, I could probably write 100 recommendations after doing a ransomware exercise. I really try and limit mine to 30. But I'm not kidding. I could write a lot, but I don't, because that's just too much. So I pick the top 20 or 30 things that I would give them. And even if they made a zillion billion mistakes, your job in the after action report is to really reinforce how fabulous this is, because you have learned lots of things and you have a great opportunity to improve. And so your job as the writer of this after action report is to really pat people on the back for, God, that was so great. What you did was so great.
Yeah.
Right?
I've been at exercises or tests, and executive will say, well, we failed because you found all these issues and blah, 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 and made everyone feel terrible.
Right? That's
Yet
terrible.
everyone, and yet all of us who discovered these actually felt glad and happy that
Right.
we found them under quote unquote controlled circumstances
Right.
and finding it out, during the real thing. But
Right.
executives were, not in that mind frame at all.
Which goes back to my point number one, is they need the support, and they need to say that at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right. Because I want people at the end, when they're feeling there with their head on their hands and they're just thinking like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. I want somebody at the end to say, this is so great. Look at everything we learned, and now we have the opportunity to get this to be better. That's really the most important thing we can do in our work.
Yeah.
Last thing I would just say about after action reports is you need to really understand your political environment, because, oh my goodness, it can be fraught with peril if you're not careful. Let me just say that I don't, even though I'm using the word recommendations here, if you were to ever see one of our after action reports, I never use the word recommendations. And that's because many of my clients are federally regulated or internally with audit. If I give them a bunch of recommendations and they don't do them, or they don't do them in a timely manner, they can be dinged. And I don't, so I use the word observations. So if you were to ever see any of our after action reports, there's a whole section. There's an executive summary, and then the next section is always observations. And that's really recommendations, but I'm not using the R word.
I learned that same trick years ago.
Mm-hmm. It's
I had
important.
recommendations, and it came back to bite me because I used that word, and it didn't click, at first. I went, okay, no longer using that word again.
Right.
Observations.
Right. Right. It's really true. Yeah. What you're doing is you're painting them into the box, and that's not really what you're there to do, right?
Yeah. Well, it also gives that perception. My recommendation, you need to do this. All is a way of almost pointing a finger. You need to do what I'm telling you to do.
Right. The last thing I want to do is in our bonus section is number 10, which is to make sure you have really effective post-exercise follow-up. I'll tell you that some of my clients we've worked for years, and if I come back after to do their next exercise a year later or something, and I see that there's a bunch of things that they haven't fixed, I'm always sad. I'm always like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. But you need to make sure that you have a really effective plan about how you're going to circulate the after action report and what you're going to do with all those observations. And you want to make sure that you're getting it in front of the right people, so hopefully you've got a business continuity steering committee who can really drive the observations, and, develop a tracking sheet, okay, we're going to do these things and we're going to assign them to people and we're going to do the follow-up. So having a list of action items that you want to be doing, making sure that that people, again, are held accountable for fixing the things that you've discovered. Because there's nothing worse than having an exercise and then not fixing anything. Yeah. One of the things that I would think that I have had a lot of success with clients of mine is that when the narrative has been, in the exercise, they're never going to really understand the above the line stuff, like how did the attack occur? And I think it's very helpful if you can have some of the key designers from the IT design team sit down with some very senior leaders and just walk through the narrative. Okay, this is how this happened. That's really powerful because they can really understand it. I just did a very cool exercise a couple of months ago where it was all based on social engineering. So it was, the idea, social engineering is really powerful. So I'm a bad guy and I'm going to go after Alex Fullick. So what do? I spent some time learning about Alex Fullick. I go to his LinkedIn page. I found out he has a Facebook page. I follow him on Twitter, blah, 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 blah. And I begin to learn about you. And then I can begin to actually then find a way that I can hook you. And I'll give you a great example of this. I did a speech several years ago, and the guy before me, the keynote speaker before me, was the chief scientist at McAfee. And he said, he gave this great story. He said, I was at a conference with a bunch of other technology professionals, and this very big, important person, not to be named, said to me, I'll never click on anything. So this chief scientist stepped away and he called. I
already know where this is going.
Yeah. He called a couple of people in his office and said, get him. So what they did, this is so smart. This is what social engineering is. They got the guy's name. They found out everything about him. He's married. He's got several kids. They go to this private school. They're in a soccer teams, blah, 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 blah. So then they figured out the names of the kids, and then they figured out who's also on the kids' team. And oh my gosh, they have a whole series of games going on right now. And so what he did is they were able to figure out in less than 5 hours the names of the kids that they played with, the parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They sent an email that looked like it came from the parent of somebody who plays in the soccer team that his kid was playing with. And they said in the email, God, wasn't that a fabulous game last week? Oh my gosh, our kids did so well. I got some great pictures. If you want to just click on these, you'll be able to get them. And what did he do? Yeah, he clicked on it. So if somebody wants you, I just want to say they can get you. And that's what people need to think about. And that's what social engineering is all about. So it's really helpful for your executives that if you share with them the narrative, they can understand like, oh my gosh, then they get a deeper understanding. And the reason you do that offline is that, I don't know about you, but many executives will be nodding their head like they really understand how that all happened, but they may not. And I don't want them to feel stupid or embarrassed, and I want them to learn. And that's why if you do an offline conversation with them about how the exercise was designed, it can actually be really powerful.
You do that after though, right?
Yeah. So it's like a month later or something. Like, remember that exercise we had? Let me just talk about really what happened behind the scenes, the above the line stuff, as we call it.
Okay.
And then the last thing is that it's really important, again, that you don't have a big window when you've done an exercise and it's all over and people are crying, that crying is replaced very quickly by something else. So you really do have to strike while the iron is hot. And you want people to still feel the power of the experience so that they can begin to fund things that need to be funded. They can really support initiatives that are going to correct the problems that you've seen and discovered. But you only do that if you're timely. And if you're not timely, that doesn't happen. And also that you are doing follow-up. And that's what your business continuity steering committee should do. Some of my clients recently have embarrassingly, kind of disbanded their business continuity steering committee. And I'd say, like, what do you mean? How could you do that? They have a really critical job, which is they are the carrot and the stick. They've got the juice to make something happen. You don't have the juice. I don't have the juice. They have the juice. So you serve up things to them like, here's our after action report from the cyber exercise. This is our task list. This is how it's going to be played out. And we'll report to you every month. And if we aren't making traction, I need you to carry the water for me.
Yeah.
That's their job, right?
Yep.
So on that note, those are the bonus end of the bonus round. That's the 10 things. And when we come together next month, we're going to really talk about how to design a cyber exercise. But I wanted to lay down the foundation this month so that people would see where we're going.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of the show. Regina, thanks very much. I know we did extra long today. We did our regular episode and we did this little shorter bonus episode. I really appreciate all the information you provided today. There was a lot, and I really hope people were paying attention and really focusing on this. And of course, to join us next month when we dig in, you're going to dive in, deeper.
I am. I look forward to it.
Yeah,
I'll see everybody then.
It'll be another good one, I'm sure. It always is.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be with you as always.
And you too, Regina. Thank you so much again. And everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.